Emotionally avoidant people can be difficult to spot. I came across a video the other day, which I will link in the description, that gave a really good tip about how to spot them early on when you get to know them. You ask them, how did they heal over their last relationship? And one of the examples he gave is exactly what my ex-husband would say, and he was an avoidant, and that is, well, I've just moved on. You could ask my ex-husband, what were you upset about? Anything that you have to reflect on about our 25-year marriage? I've just moved on, honey. I've moved on. People who are emotionally avoidant does not mean that they're bad at relationships. It depends on what kind of a relationship you want. Some people don't really want to talk about their feelings or be closely connected like that. But I will tell you, when an emotionally avoidant person will not air their grievances, they won't let you know when they're angry. So instead, they'll just harbor all these resentments against you. It's the worst thing. I will never, ever again. I don't think I'm made for relationships. I find people very annoying. But I thought this video was really good, and he really hit the nail on the head when he said one of the examples. If you ask this person, how did you get over your last breakup? How did you heal? How did you grow? If you ask me, I would tell you, I went to Landmark, I went to meetup groups, I went to like polyamory groups to learn about nonviolent communication. I did a little bit of therapy, just really reflecting on what happened, trying to figure it out. And I was heartbroken for a really long time, had to find my way, all this stuff. But he would just say, I don't need to talk about that. I've moved on. Why do you want to talk about that? I'm not saying that you want to talk about it for hours, but some acknowledgement of what you've done. So in the video, the coach says that emotionally available people are going to give you specific answers about how they've healed. You know, they'll tell you they've done coaching or therapy or journaling, or they got more into their faith journey, and also that they learned about boundaries, better communication, how to regulate their emotions. Actually, those are all things I've done too. But if you're with a dismissive avoidant, they are going to tell you, well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Well, you just get over it. Time heals all wounds. Oh, I've just moved on. Or, as one of the guys in the comments said, if someone asked me like that, anything like that, the date would be over. Like, they're just not going to talk about it because they're very uncomfortable with feelings. Now, where did that come from? That comes from childhood emotional neglect. And I know my ex-husband was neglected by his cold mother. If you're watching this, cold mother, and I know you're not, I think she was just a cold mother, and because of how she was raised. That's not really fair. She gets along with her kids. They like her. But I think that she was also raised to not have emotions. She grew up, it was like during the Depression, or her parents grew up during the Depression. I don't know. Like, emotions were not allowed in their household. I think that maybe his parents grew up in homes where there was like some rage or emotions were not allowed. Oh, yeah, I remember. So my ex-husband's grandmother was over at dinner. So she's like in her 70s. And, we have like these little kids and we're having dinner. And you know how little kids are. They're a little bit boisterous and they'll talk. And, like they're 1 and 2, these kids at the time. And they're just getting on my nerves a little bit. And his grandmother said, hey, kid, we just never allowed that. We just never allowed that. So at the time I thought she probably didn't remember how kids are, but maybe they were just repressed, because when in the Depression, life was hard. and people had to focus on getting things done, and you can't deal with a bunch of whining kids or people's feelings. Dealing with people's feelings is often a luxury for the people that have the have the luxury of dealing with that, because if you don't, you can't. You have to deal with what's for dinner, where's the money, or who's feeding the chickens. We're starving, there's a bomb overhead, there's a depression, where's the food coming from? And so at some point, people have to grow emotionally. And I think it was harder for people to grow emotionally until the 90s, when I was a young mom and these books were coming out about you want your boys to feel emotions, you want to feel emotions, you want to regulate your emotions. But there wasn't really as much talk about emotions, even when I was a young mother, as there is now. I'm a lot more aware about the importance of emotions than I was then. And so life moves forward, and I think that people of my age, I'm 64 now, who are comfortable with emotions are very blessed. But many people of my generation were taught that emotions are bad. Don't feel anything because it gets in the way of getting stuff done. Buckle up, because life was hard. So you can't just sit around crying or moping. You have to get shit done. And boys were shamed for crying, and you just couldn't deal with stuff like that. So it comes from childhood emotional neglect. But also, as people become adults, they have to do some self-reflection. They have to learn from their past relationships. So, like I said, people are comfortable with different amounts of emotion. The problem, though, is dismissive avoidants are not going to tune into your emotions, because they're shut off. If they don't know when how they feel, how can they care how you feel? Because they're uncomfortable with the whole emotional territory. So, like it can look like sex can only be with eyes closed, like there's no emotional connection even during sex that's allowed. And they can also not, like I said before, not realize when they're angry. And one thing that I learned in my marriage that was 25 years was that the hidden cost of not dealing with things that upset you. If you don't realize that you're angry, like he didn't even realize when he was angry. I realized when I was angry, but I didn't word it. So it's equally bad. Not dealing with anger and resentments can destroy a relationship. You think that there's no price to pay because you're not bringing it up, you're just not dealing with it, but it shows up because one thing I learned is you have to deal with resentments. And after that, I became very sensitive to if people were resentful of me, because I was married to a guy who was resentful of me for years and would not even say anything. So I became hypersensitive after I got divorced to whether people were angry with me. And a few years ago, I was working with a therapist to try to figure out the last remnants of my resentments against my ex-husband, because for years after the divorce, I felt like I just had a bad deal with him, okay, because he was so emotionally unavailable. And we were talking about resentments, and I was saying something about, like, I wonder if my friend is angry with me. And she said, why are you so concerned about people being angry with you? And it's like, okay, I just got a little overly sensitive because I saw the damage that can be done when people are angry and they don't tell you. So being emotionally available is knowing how you feel. That's it. And having some good boundaries and being able to express it. And why shouldn't we share our feelings? There was a guy that left a comment in the video, and he was saying, like, if someone asked me a question like that, the date would be over. Oh yeah, I'm just going through the comments. Another one could be like, she was the crazy one. That, like, always blaming the other person, but sometimes the other person is the crazy one. So then I would say, like, what had you attracted to her? How did you get over your breakup? Can still bring it to that question. And because if you're a person, I think any person in a relationship has to be comfortable with some amount of sharing their emotions or what they've gone through, or be able to say, that was a very hard time in my life and I went to some therapy. You don't have to go into details. until you know the person a little better. But just saying I've moved on is very dismissive. It's already dismissive. And so it's like, well, why would I want to date you if you're that dismissive? You have no insight into yourself. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But I think that was a good one. I'll put the video in the description below, and thank you for watching my video.